Hey Charles, welcome. Did you have a good long weekend?
I have, Nick. Had a good chance to catch up on some work today with nobody in the office and people interrupting me. So it was really, really good from that point of view. And the weather was just sensational. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, got to play some golf, or try to play some golf anyway.
You tried. Oh, you'd be okay, wouldn't you, by now?
I have a single-figure handicap, but
Very good.
that even frustrates the hell out of you too. It just still doesn't matter. You still think you can always do better. That's the sad part about it. I think that's why I like it, because you can never beat the game, whether it's the weather or the people you're playing with or the course you're playing on. Everything changes all the time.
So many variables.
So many.
And if you play in Florida, if you're a professional there, you've got to look out for alligators. You never know what's going to come up.
I played in Vegas recently, if anybody's listening, and I turned up earlier than my mate, sadly, and I pulled out the credit card to pay, and it was $797 for the two of us.
Whoa!
There you go. So I felt sick all the way through. It just goes to show you how great Australia is as a country when you want to get out and do things.
Absolutely, that is not a public golf course, that one. So, Charles, let's talk about affordability to get the show started, and remind folks to call in 13 12 83. Charles has a wealth of experience when it comes to real estate. Affordability is, a hot topic still, isn't it? There's a lot of things being tossed around by government.
Oh, I think an election could be won or lost over this topic. You know, when you think about the amount of discussion that's gone on right across the country, and also all the different people associated in the press, it's a really, really heavy subject. And rightly so, because it is an issue in many parts of the country, but there are other parts of the country that we've talked about that continually address it. And I was talking to your young producer, Sam, earlier on. He seems to have grown into a real estate fanatic now, and he was talking about areas in Sydney that can be redeveloped. And I hadn't even looked at that part of it. And
Right.
he was talking about areas like Camellia. I know that around Liverpool Council, they've taken up a whole bunch of the area alongside the river, which was considered a very ordinary old industrial area. And they've got major plans for apartment developments on the river with riverfront restaurants and God knows whatever else. And you think about that, and then you look at some of the industrial areas in Sydney. You know, there are still some great pockets of land. And Camellia, of course, that area is located in behind Rose Hill racecourse, and it's one of those landlocked areas you never hear about.
Yep.
And there's one little road I know that goes into it, and that's the same one that goes into the racetrack. And you see a lot of heavy machinery going into it. I think the gas works is in there. And what a magnificent area that would make for residential development. Well,
Little by little, there's a lot of reclamation going on, isn't there? And also in Sydney, further out at Oran Park, which used to be the site of the famous racetrack. That's had massive change. Similar things are happening in Brisbane, Melbourne, because of this land shortage.
Yeah, look, they got 5,000 blocks of land out of that area at Oran Park, which is quite massive. And I bumped into some people there that had bought it was only like a 5-acre property sitting there on the edge of Leppington, and out of nowhere, railway station turns up, town planning turns up, the whole city is being redesigned, and now this 5-acre lot can take a few hundred apartments. So things are changing, and there's still plenty of land, but I don't quite know how we're going to fight the issues, because most of the issues are really nothing to do with federal, it's more to do with state government and local councils, and because some councils are more proactive than others, and it's those councils that I think can probably lead the way and demonstrate to other councils what can be done.
But you've come out punching, so you're saying that affordability may well make or break an election for a government.
I really think so, because there's so many people angry with the whole process. And you look at the talk about superannuation and first home buyers, you look at the median price in Sydney, for example, and there's a significant population in Sydney that's really hating the process right now. I do think that it is going to be an election issue. I certainly think negative gearing was when they were there. That was a pretty serious issue. And I think
that's a federal issue, isn't it?
That's a federal issue, and that's going to run all the way down into state and local government, because at the end of the day it's going to impact on the state governments, it's going to impact on local businesses or investors, and I think even more so some of the state governments, if they don't get it together. You think about the amount of money that they get now out of stamp duty. just stamp duty alone. So there are so many areas that are going to be impacted if they don't do something about affordability. And affordability, I'll fight it all the way, still comes down to supply issues, and those supply issues are strong in some parts of the country and very, very weak where they're needed most.
13 12 83 is the number tonight to talk to Charles Tarbey, and he's here for Property Fast Track. And Nick Bennett with you. And still ahead tonight, Tom Panos. He's a great auctioneer. He'll let us know what went down in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. And also we'll go to some other markets where Century 21 has a footprint in Menai in New South Wales, and also into Ellenbrook. We'll have a look at that.
In Perth. I hope we get a hold of Christian, because I really want people to find out what's going on around the entire country. A lot of what we hear is the Sydney, Melbourne. We always hear about that booming market. And I think it'd be great to get a view from somebody on the ground in an area that has stock. And so what are they doing as real estate practitioners? What are the investors doing? What are the buyers doing? Are they sitting back? Are they making bigger offers? Are they not turning up? What's the process like for the individuals there in those markets?
We'll also catch up with one of your Sky News compadres, Margaret Lomas.
Now, I'm so thrilled about this.
Yeah.
Margaret is one of the most intelligent real estate practitioners you'll find in the country. She's been involved in property marketing and investment herself personally. She puts her money where her mouth is. I had the pleasure of meeting her many years ago when I got invited on her show, which is a live show. They take live calls, and I've been on that panel, and people ring in, and you've got to be prepared to answer the questions that they might have for you. So I'm thrilled that Margaret's taken the time to get on the show tonight. She can talk about every aspect of real estate.
Live show tonight too, and Charles Tarbey here to take your calls on 13 12 83. So, Charles, you've also been keeping your eye on the nation's capital. That'll be Canberra.
Yeah, I've been watching the auction stats at Canberra for a very, very long time, and it's come up all of the time that it matches, in many cases, Sydney-Melbourne market. On the odd occasion, it's done better. And a lot of time people talk about Canberra being attached to elections. You know, they've always said that if Labor got in, the buy in Canberra because there'd be more public servants. And so if Liberal got in, it wouldn't be as good. But that just hasn't been the case. And it's one of those marketplaces where what I like about Canberra is it's actually organised. It's been a planned city from day one.
Yeah.
And I was looking recently at the area of Gungahlin, which is a consolidation or an area that has a dozen or so suburbs to it. And they've staged the suburbs. They've staged the growth, very similar to what they've done in Salisbury, in those areas, Elizabeth in South Australia.
Yep.
And in staging those suburbs, they've managed to constantly create a supply, but of recent times, the supply they've created isn't meeting demand either. So things are really on the move in that region.
Good to know. Is there a good amount of jobs to be had in Canberra beyond the government sector?
Well, I guess Canberra's one of those areas that's got that security about it, with the government being there, and I would suggest that it's an area that, because of that we thought you could always invest in very, very safely. But ownership of property is different in Canberra. Queanbeyan's just on the edge, and the ownership of property in Queanbeyan's different in terms of the way you can purchase property.
That's in New South Wales?
Yes. Right. So it's a whole place unto its own, sitting out there near, not far from Goulburn, where I went to boarding school, and from Crookwell, where I grew up. But nonetheless, it's an area that's new, it's clean, it's crisp, it's organised, and they are preparing for more buyers. But I still think they've got a lot more work to go. But that is an example of what can be done. You
like Gungahlin, which means Little Rocky Hill in Aboriginal.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't know that, but it is. Yep, there it is, an Aboriginal meaning Little Rocky Hill. Wow.
As opposed to the big green grassy hill where Parliament House sits.
Yes. I have been there. I went there and did Sky business inside of the Parliament House. They've got a little studio that you pop in there when you do Sky business on the road. So I didn't meet any pollies, but I did have to go through all this security just to spend 15 minutes on air.
You don't look threatening. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey is here taking your calls tonight. Or you can email clickfeedback@talkinglifestyle.com.au. Nick Bennett with you on this Monday night. Auction clearance rates, Charles. Look, Easter weekend, not a whole lot happens, but some things did.
Yeah, look, the number of auctions certainly diminishes in terms of each capital city. There might have been 150 properties in Sydney as opposed to 850 properties a week before. But the clearance rates in Sydney, it's still 77%. I would say the national clearance rate's at 63.5% as opposed to the 77.6 last week is no big deal because of the Easter weekend. But Melbourne still had a clearance rate of 83%. Now Canberra, this is the one we were talking about, hit 82%.
Wow.
So it beat Sydney. And it's been sitting in those ranges for quite some time. So overall, the clearance rates are still very healthy. I think next weekend we'll start to see whether or not the market's changing, as people are talking about. Auctioneers are saying it's getting tougher. Agents are saying the inquiry is dropping, and I think it'll be interesting to see the next few weeks what happens around the countryside.
So you're talking to agents all the time, through your contacts at Century 21. When they say inquiries dropping, do you know yet whether that is on owner-occupier stuff or as investments?
Well, look, there's a couple of areas there. Certainly the owner-occupied properties are a little bit slower, but the off-the-plan sales are the ones where it's probably quieter than anywhere else. And I've noticed that businesses that have built their entire platform around project marketing are starting to pull back quite heavily. And there's talk of people not being able to complete transactions from overseas. There's talk of banks tightening up the lending policies before settlement occurs. There are people who may not be in the same position financially in a year's time that they were 2 years ago when they first decided to buy a property. One of them may have lost their job. There's a whole series of factors that can play out in project marketing. So if there's an area that's going to have a tougher time, it's going to be there. But in the general market at open for inspections, there are fewer people coming through, and the auctioneers will tell you they're finding it harder to draw a bid.
Yeah. Okay. So more than likely being sold for less than what they were maybe a few months back.
I think there's going to be a bit of pressure on them, which isn't a bad thing. But, the rental movement is also being impacted by it too, because I've noticed that that's changing. So I've noticed that last few weeks the average revenue for a rental property has actually declined. And usually you see it climbing, and people complain that in certain capital cities again, in Sydney it's still tight, because the vacancy rates in Sydney last week were only 0.54%.
It's tough to find a place to rent.
It's very tough. But the further out you get, the easier it becomes, and then other capital cities are not having as great a time. And so I think if you look at the rental situation, that's probably going to decline on an average across the country. In some parts of Sydney and Melbourne it'll increase, but on average across the country it's going to decline. The best performance that I've seen of late has been Perth, because that's a marketplace that everybody's been looking at and saying, hey, you want to keep right away from there. But
because the economy's backed off and other things.
Yeah. I can go back on my stats every week, week on end, and I can go back 4 or 5 weeks and see the vacancy rates on property were sitting at 10.17% at one stage, which is incredibly high. And in the last 3 weeks, they've dropped. And so I'm really, really pleased about that. Perth vacancy rate last week hit 7.64%.
Wow. So
it's a great marketplace in the sense of there's a correction occurring, and it seems to be occurring week on week at the moment. So I'm inclined to be more encouraged about the Perth market than a lot of people might be.
All right. So that's the old adage, isn't it? Buy low, sell high. So perhaps Perth is not a bad time to get in.
Yeah, not bad at all.
All right, 13 12 83, Property Fast Track tonight with Charles Tarbey and Nick Bennett with you. That's the number, 13 12 83, if you have a question for Charles. He's been around the block a few times and knows his stuff, so take advantage of him being here tonight. Give him a call. We'll go to Tom Panos in just a moment and get the auction wrap for Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. Good to be here for this Easter Monday night. Nick Bennett with you. And Charles Tarbey, the Easter weekend, always a very special and quiet time of year on the auction front. Few vendors brave enough to sell on a weekend where lots are away. But a hot market is a hot market, regardless of public holiday. So let's see how things panned out. Tom Panos is on board tonight. Good evening, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Well, thank you, mate. Welcome back from the Big Apple.
Thank you. Well, Nick and Charles, I was away, particularly for the reasons you just mentioned. It's one of the weeks. There's about 5 weeks in the year, guys, that really there's not that many auctions that take place. Yeah. Obviously, the first couple of weeks of January, then you have Easter, Occasionally, when you've got a long weekend such as October, if it falls on that weekend, that affects auctions. There wasn't much happening in terms of the auction markets across the country. Those properties that did go to auction still sold well. But Nick and Charles, it's really interesting is, on the day of auctions in Australia, I've got to tell you, I was in the US, but there were no auctions happening there because there's not that many auctions that happen there.
Let's talk about that scenario. So, what, New Yorkers aren't big on the whole auction process?
No. I think what it is Australia's very unique, particularly Sydney, Melbourne, and to a lesser extent Brisbane, where you've got far more buyers looking to buy real estate that's available. And Charles will tell you all the training that happens in real estate over the last 2 decades, where agents are being trained, are all being trained about how to get a listing. In the USA, generally speaking, getting a listing is not so difficult as getting a buyer. So what you find is auction conditions are usually more conducive, Nick, when you've got lots of buyers wanting to buy the one thing. And that's not the case in the USA. It's a very fragmented industry. There's, lots of different websites, agents working in lots of different companies. A lot of them just work for themselves, and they're all running around. They represent buyers as well as they represent sellers. It's a different model. There's an agent for the buyer and there's an agent for the seller. And generally speaking, auctions are not conducted.
You talk to a real estate broker, as they call them in the US, and they'll tell you, or a real estate agent will tell you they've got 500 brokers working for them. And 500 brokers meaning that if you're in New York, Tom, which is where you've been, and you're in real estate, you travel around mostly in a taxi cab if you've got a client with you, and you never talk real estate because 9 times out of 10 the taxi driver has got a real estate agent's license and they're listening to everything you say.
Wow.
Oh, Charles, it's funny you say that because the guy that I had as one of my cab rides, he said to me, "Are you here for business?" I said, "Oh, yeah, partly business, part pleasure." He says, "Oh, what kind of business are you in?" I said, "Real estate." He says, "I'm kind of real estate as well." I said, "What do you mean kind of?" He goes, "Oh, I dabble a little bit, and sell." I said, "Mate, look, in Australia, you're either in it or you're out of it."
You're out of it, yeah. But it's very much like that, and you're absolutely right. There was massive oversupply for quite some time, and as you know, they were bundling properties together. Governments were bundling them together and selling them. And Nick spoke about the fact that in Australia, when you buy, you're committed here. It's your personal guarantee. But in the US, when the market crashed, people took the white goods out of the place. They took the doors and the windows and left, and nobody chased them. It was just as simple as that. So there was a massive, massive oversupply. I remember a friend of mine actually bought a 2-bedroom villa on the golf course in Las Vegas for $43,000. So it just goes to show you how crazy that market fell.
You could easily just go buy a property next to Sylvester Stallone or Lady Gaga and then not make your mortgage payments, and they can come and collect it.
Yeah. How's that? So, Tom, if the Americans aren't auctioning much, what's the most popular method of sale?
They do for sale, and I actually did a bit of a tour with someone that took me around and showed me various, apartments. Nick, apartments are the main kind of real estate that's sold in New York, particularly, and around Central Park. And what they do is they list them with a for sale price, and there's a lot of price reductions. Like the tour guide taking me around would say, "Oh, that unit there is Demi Moore's unit. She had listed for X amount of millions. She's now reduced it to this price." So for sale is the main method. And it's really interesting. All the expensive real estate in New York surrounds Central Park. So anything around that park is what gets a high price. And anything, outside of that park drops significantly. But the one marketplace that I was fascinated with was Harlem, of course, which is the place where the Harlem Globetrotters run.
And all that great music.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about great music. There's a theatre there called Apollo Theatre. Yeah. And Apollo Theatre is the theatre where a lot of the famous musicians came out of And the way it worked is if the crowd didn't like you, you'd never get another chance. And people like the Jackson Five were there. I thought I'd queue up and get a ticket, but after waiting for 3.5 hours in a line, I thought to myself, this is not meant to be. But Harlem's interesting because Harlem reminded me of an area that was not a lot of interest in there. It was considered to be down and out. It wasn't looked after well. It was quite a dirty area, and now what you're seeing is it's being rejuvenated, and it reminded me a lot of suburbs.
Redfern.
Yeah, Redfern, spot on.
Redfern and other areas. Tom, the interesting thing about the market in the US compared to here, and this is just what I wanted to touch on, is perception. We get the same issue here in Australia where people are perceiving the market's gone crazy because they're focused on two locations, Sydney and Melbourne. Watch all the shows on pay television, you see all these $1 million shows and you see all this gloss and glitz, and it makes it look like selling real estate's just easy. Put on a party, bring people in, offer champagne, don't get them to sign anything under duress, of course, and there you are. And it's absolutely nothing like that, and that's the frustrating part. There are real estate practitioners in Australia that want to go to the US because they're watching these $1 million agent shows.
Yeah, and I think, Charles, you've nailed it on the head there. Part of the problem with these US shows is they've actually brainwashed a new generation of young agents that will spend a lot of time and money looking like these $1 million agents in the US. They'll have the $2,000 suits. They'll have $2,000 a month leases, and the poor guys and girls are out there in real estate. Living this fantasy Hollywood world, but in reality... And
that's exactly what it is, that fantasy holiday world. You've heard me say this before, Tom. When perception meets reality, reality comes off second best.
Yeah,
that's very good.
Said.
Hey, Tom, thanks for your time, mate. Good to talk and get some insights into what happens in America, especially the Big Apple in New York City. And clearly, real estate is not like a Tupperware party. Thank you, Tom. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, guys.
13 12 83 is our number. Charles Tarbey's here tonight, offering some advice if you need it for real estate. Give us a call, 13 12 83. And Ronnie's called in. Hello, Ronnie.
Good evening, Charles. How are you? Happy Easter to you and all the guys down there. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm in Sydney. We're in. Where are we?
We're in downtown. We're near the fish markets.
Where are you? Oh, you're in Seven Hills.
I'm out at Seven Hills.
Well, we should get some fish for you from the fish markets, but they might be closed, Ronnie. You live in a great location, Seven Hills. Is that where your home is, or are you looking to buy?
Yes. No, I am I'm on the north side, as they call it, of Seven Hills, which is borderline of Winston Hills, Balcombe Hills, and Kings Langley there at the end of the M2.
Oh, I see. So you pretend you've got a different postcode. All right.
Correct.
Yeah, I've seen this before.
Yeah, the reason for my call is Winston Hills has the same postcode, same sort of same council, Blacktown Council, and townhouses there. 4-bedroom, double garage. Townhouse the other day went for 1.4 million, and I live in a 6-bedroom home with a double garage and have a park next door, and the real estate's telling me that I can get 1.2, and I'm just seeing is the market in Seven Hills north or any of both sides of Seven Hills, is it going to catch up to the surrounding suburbs?
Oh, I can tell you that we have an incredibly active office in Seven Hills, run by two exceptional real estate practitioners in Ross and Penny, and they literally tell me that whatever comes on the market is moving incredibly quickly in that area. And so it's one of those areas, particularly if you've got a unique home, 6 bedrooms, is quite substantial, next to a park. It's the sort of property that you would want to put to auction. And I think that's the only way you can determine whether you'll get the best possible price for it or the true market value.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to make a decision on.
And do I think
hold on to it.
And do I think it's an exceptional area? Absolutely. It's just an area that's got everything around it: shopping, schools, hospitals, freeways. It's just a spectacular area that used to be an average suburb west of Sydney. You buy your first home in, but it's just a fantastic place.
Thanks for your call, Ronnie. All the best. 13 12 83. And still ahead tonight, does it make sense to manage your own investment property? That's going to be a question on the table tonight and some insight coming from Margaret Lomas very soon. But before that, around the grounds, we'll check out what's happening in WA and New South Wales with Century 21's offices there. Good to be here for this Monday night. Nick Bennett with you and Charles Tarbey, author, and with Century 21. And we're going around the grounds now. And it's very interesting to get a snapshot of a particular region and learn a bit more about it. And joining us tonight to help us drill down is Stuart Maloney from Century 21 Menai in Sydney South. Hey, Stuart.
Oh, good evening, Nick. Good evening, Charles. Happy Easter to everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Stuart. Now, Stuart has a background in real estate that extends right back to when he was only a young lad of 3 or 4 years of age. He'd go and hang out with his dad putting up real estate signs. So, yeah. And how old are you now, Stuart?
34.
And you've been in real estate only in the Shire.
That's right. So the Sutherland Shire is around about half an hour from the airport for the listeners who are not familiar with New South Wales, and great place to live. And it's a very young area compared to a lot of other parts of.
Yeah, it was reasonably undiscovered for a long period of time because with the bridges that there wasn't a lot of transportation to take you across. I used to go across there in a ferry when I was a kid. So it was like another world. The whole Shire was like another world. But like you said, it's 30 minutes south of the city of Sydney airport, and it's just not that far away. But and you've almost got a holiday atmosphere because you're surrounded by water, oceans and rivers all the way through. So that's what most people are attracted to.
Speaking of bridges, I drove over it the other day. A bit unkind calling it Tom Ugly's bridge, isn't it, Stuart?
Well, I only live around the corner from that, so hang on, guys.
It used to be the only one you could cross, and they'd build a second bridge alongside of it.
Yeah.
But Stuart, you're pricing it. You've got a lot of apartments being developed in the area now. Your pricing has increased substantially. Tell us a little bit about that.
Look, we do. I've just come back like Tom from the States to one of the global conventions that we've all been to, and one of the things that they mentioned was about relevance from what the customer wants and what they need to know. And talking about apartments, for the Sutherland Shire in general, we have a real problem with an undersupply of properties. There was a study that was done not long ago, and they were short around about 13,000 dwellings. That's dropped down to 10,000, and at the moment it's very difficult to get an accurate number from council, but around about 40-odd complexes that have got DAs that have been submitted, but they haven't yet started commencement. Our largest complex in the Shire is the Kirrawee Brick Pit, around 750 units it's being built, and the average is about 30 or 40. So being relevant for what I think that your listeners might want to hear is that I wouldn't be too concerned of any talk of corrections or bubbles or anything like that, because if with all of the property that is not yet built, even if it was built, it's still not going to make an impact.
So you've got a massive undersupply in your area?
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay. And you know that's only relevant in certain areas. It's not the same around the rest of the country. And Stuart, that's the issue. We're always hearing about how crazy it is in certain markets, and we're going to hear from Western Australia soon and see the complete opposite to what's going on for you. So you would encourage people to buy apartment in that area, mainly because there's very little land left to develop.
That too, but also because of the returns that you get. I mean, for the average yield for Sydney is still pretty good, just over the 2%, but we're still averaging around about 4% and 4.1 between units and houses. So that's still outstanding compared to some of the other areas that you can invest in.
Right, and the flight path, I notice when I fly in and out of Sydney, your area is not impacted, very rarely impacted at all.
No, not really. At the moment, I'm sitting out in the car, and I don't think you can hear anything overhead. So. Yep.
Okay. And real estate for you in that area, if you were to pick a suburb in that whole region, because it's a big region, just one suburb, which location would it be?
Look, I think the best value for money would be around the 2234 Menai region, which you could buy a house. The average price is around $1 million at the moment. There are some opportunities that for ex-government properties that I'm one of the few panel agents that you can still pick up a Torrance title house on a 600 square metre block of land for about $750,000.
Well, there you go.
Those are things that are unheard of.
And that goes against everything that we're hearing. Stuart, that's fantastic, mate.
Thanks for your time, mate. Stuart Maloney from Century 21 Menai in Sydney South. And now to Christian Smith from Ellenbrook, C21. That's about 20 k's north of Perth. G'day, Christian.
How are you going? Thanks, Nick and Charles.
Pleasure.
Christian, yeah. Well, now, you just, were you listening there to what Stuart had to say?
Yeah, I was a little bit envious about
Yes.
the undersupply.
And I think that's the issue, isn't it? You know, when you think about it, the marketplaces that we talk about right across the country, Perth is a completely different marketplace on its own. Tell us some of the issues you have that you and I both know are turning into opportunities.
Well, the issue that we initially had is that there's a lot of land development. Western Australia with the mining sector was just growing exponentially. The confidence was in the market for probably way too long. And then with the sudden change in that particular, or within the West Australian industry for the mining resource sector, it kind of flipped very, very quickly. And it's almost flipped to the point where I don't think people were really aware or could plan ahead of the actual impact that it would actually have.
Now, you have a lot of developers there that got themselves into trouble.
Yes, most definitely. There's a lot of land banks, a lot of, whether you're north or east or south of Perth, there's actually a lot of land that's already banked up, developments are ready to go. So those developers are working really, really hard to working with builders as well with the house and land packages. And that's causing a little bit of confusion in the market because sometimes your house and land packages are a lot cheaper in some areas than what an established property is. Then you go to another suburb and with like $45,000 incentives for house and land packages, then all of a sudden the house and land packages sometimes are more expensive than the established properties. So it's causing a little bit of confusion with the buyers in this particular market.
Your area is relatively, like it's a lot of new area around it. Tell me, what would you buy a three-bedroom home, three-bedroom brick home, relatively new home in one of the locations there in Ellenbrook?
Okay, if you're looking at an established property, you can pick up a 3x2 at the moment from anywhere from $330 to $370.
Yeah.
You'd be renting those out for roughly around about, say, $300 to $320 a week.
Yeah. Okay.
Then the flip side of that is just in the Ellenbrook area, you can buy 3x2s as low as brand new, as low as $320. But then there's another new development in the town centre where they're trying to move the top end product, the 3x2s, for as much as $415, $420. Hence the confusion. So there's a lot of buyers sitting there watching the market. What we're finding at the moment, just probably the last 6 to 8 weeks, a lot of people have got, say, 15 years worth of equity in their properties. We're finding they're starting to see the opportunities. So they're using the equity in their properties now and it's only literally like last 7, 8 weeks. So the more mature property owner is realising now that it's possible that there's some green shoots at the bottom end of that market and it's starting to move.
Well, you and I both know that Perth needed a correction badly. It needed it. It got it a lot quicker than everybody expected. And so most of the pain is gone. Where I was talking about the vacancy rates are dropping week after week. So I see a lot of opportunity in your area. Nick, we give away, we auction a home live over there. Or there's building company, land company, Century 21, a whole bunch of people get together and they build this property and it goes live to auction and sold. And how much was raised last year for?
It was 770 from that.
770,000 for the Children's Telethon. When's it on again?
Fantastic.
Is it on soon?
Yeah, it's in October.
In October, great.
That's on Channel 9 or 7?
Channel 7.
Yeah, okay.
Yep,
So we've been a supporter of that. Sorry, Charles.
You get up there and auction it live, and we've had some very interesting auctions over the years. I think I did attend one where the actual bidder couldn't tell us any information, and we very quickly found out when he was being interviewed live on air that he'd actually escaped as a patient from an institution, found himself at the auction and started bidding. And it was only when he was being interviewed live, and the chap said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Such and such." "And what do you do for a living?" "Nothing." "Did you think you'd buy this house when you came here today?" "No, had no idea." So, but they do a great job, these guys, and Christian and his team support it very strongly.
When's your next auction?
In October.
In October. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you, Christian, from Century 21, Ellenbrook. That's about 20 k's north of Perth. You've been there a fair bit. So
I have. It's just a great location. And Perth is such a new city, and I think where Christian is located is prime for massive growth. And I think they're right on the edge. They're right on the edge. They've had their moments, and I know that it's going to change there, and it's just that timing issue once again. So.
Now, Charles, today around the office, we like to toss ideas about.
Uh-oh.
And I said to Sambo, our intrepid producer, I said, hey, let's think about getting someone on who can talk about the ups and downs of managing your own investment property. Who would want to do that? Would you want to do that?
I struggle with it, owning businesses that manage properties for landlords. I mean, it's a hard job. I personally would never, even if my children, I said, look, don't come near me. take it to a real estate agent, because it's just not the place you want to be. And I know a lot of people think that they can save money and they can do it, but no.
All right, that's your opinion. Good. We'll find out some more from Margaret Lomas about that topic in just a moment. She's the host of Your Money, Your Call on Sky News. And Charles, taking your calls now on 13 12 83. If you've got any questions about property here on Fast Track. Yeah, Charles Tarbey here tonight, 13 12 83, taking your calls on all things property. And Nick Bennett with you. No one likes paying fees, from road tolls to ATM charges. If we can, it's smart to avoid them. So if you have an investment property, it's tempting to avoid the management fees by managing the place yourself, but does it stack up? Margaret Lomas is the host of Your Money, Your Call on Sky News, and she's on board tonight. Good evening, Margaret.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, Margaret, so good to return the favour and have somebody of your level and integrity on the show.
Thanks, Charles.
Now,
do you think it's a good idea to manage your own property?
I think it's a lousy idea, to be quite honest with you.
I'm so glad you said that. You have a substantial number of investment properties without going into too much detail. You've been investing for a very, very long time. During the course of your investing, did you ever manage a property yourself privately?
Never been tempted, and quite frankly, I'm definitely of the opinion that when you first decide that you're going to become a property investor, the decision has to be, am I going to be a property investor or a property manager? Because I don't believe you can be both.
Why is that? Why can't they? Could there be a good symbiotic relationship if you did it right?
Look, I think it's just plain silly. You think about it for a moment. When you work out, and I've done the exercise myself, how much it actually costs to have it managed, it's roughly around about $7 an hour. Now, the first question you have to ask yourself is, how much is my own time worth? And I can tell you, mine's worth a darn sight more than $7 an hour.
I would hope so.
And to be spending that time, that hour, or 3 hours a week, which is pretty much what it's going to take you to manage an investment property, then that's 3 hours a week that I'm not looking around for more property, adding to my portfolio, investing more wisely, or even just becoming educated about how to be a better investor.
Margaret, there's an application or an app that's hitting Australian shores out of the US where there's two. There's one I'm involved in, which I'll leave for the moment, but this other one is bringing the landlord and the tenants together directly so that they're working and negotiating together. Now, can you imagine, because you see all sorts of situations in property management where landlords or tenants, once they're face-to-face with each other, there's an issue, or if there's an issue with maintenance, or if there's an issue with the courts, what it can go like. And this application is about to hit our shores.
Right.
Look, I think the issue is that people seem to have this false sense of security. They want to look after their property. They want to keep an eye on their property. And I think that there's nothing worse. You're not qualified as a property investor to also be a property manager. You're not qualified to choose the right kind of tenant. You don't have access to the bad tenant database, which is critical. And you don't know what kind of tenant you're going to get. And if you get one of those tenants, as many of them are, who make endless phone calls every week, wanting something new, needing something done, then you're going to be fielding those phone calls. So suddenly what you thought was going to be a fairly simple job that was going to save you maybe $20 a week after tax suddenly becomes the bane of your life. And once that tenant knows how to find you, they're likely not going to leave you alone. And I just think it's it's just a very bad idea.
Margaret, what if you're semi-retired and you do the right thing and appoint an agent to find a good tenant, so they're getting all the database checks done and they get paid, I think, generally 2 weeks rent up front to do that, and then you manage it? What about that scenario? And let's say you may only have one property.
Look, if you want to turn property investing into a hobby, then go for it. But really, if you want to be the kind of person who has a decent portfolio, and let's face it, one property as an investment isn't going to do much more for you than having no properties in terms of a retirement income. It's just not enough for you to have that. It's unlikely you're going to reach retirement with it debt-free, so it's likely it'll still have some debt. It's not going to create enough income for you. So if you're going to be a property investor, you'll probably have more than one. You might have 3 or 5 or 7 of them.
Yeah, you need to be a serious investor to make it work.
You do.
Margaret, one of the things I was just thinking about before when you were telling about tenants, there's the other side of the coin, and that is where landlords become intrusive. So if you're a private tenant, I've known of situations where landlords will just walk into a house because they think they own the home and they think they can walk in at any time.
Oh, my goodness, that happened to my son-in-law recently. He was renting a house for his wedding with a couple of his mates. The landlord knew that that's the situation, and she made the decision she was just going to walk in the middle of the night around about 11 o'clock and talk to them, and just walked in and started to abuse them. And fortunately, he'd been a property manager before, and he read her rights and said, you're not allowed to be here. But I think the important thing to note here, though, is that there are some jobs you should be able to do as a landlord, and there are others that you need to leave to the professionals. And really, when it comes into its own is when you do have a difficult tenant. A property manager knows what to do about that.
They do,
Margaret, we're going to have to leave it there, but good advice. Thank you so much.
Margaret, thank you so much.
Margaret Lomas is the host of Your Money, Your Call on Sky News. Charles Tarbey, thank you for fast-tracking real estate for us tonight on Property Fast Track. You're back next Monday. And Charles here every Monday taking your calls on 13 12 83.